Hello and welcome to my sewing room. My name's Wendy and I like to share my projects with you. I do homewares, patchwork, bags, that kind of thing. And my last video was how to make this hold-all bag. And I made a pattern from an old carry-on bag I had, a sort of hold-all, which I've had for years. I bought it about 10 years ago and it's falling apart now. So I made a pattern from it, and my last video was how to make this bag, which is unlined, and I said that I would do a lined version. The advantages of this bag are that it stands up on its own. The original was like that as well. It's got a closed-in zip like this, and I've added these tabs. I like zip tabs, and I've added these zip tabs, which means that when the bag's zipped up, it's completely enclosed, and that's why I've hung on to the original, and that's why I've made that replacement. Now, I said I'd share a lined version with you, and I've decided that I'm going to actually make this bag for my mum. Now, she's 87 now, don't think she'll mind me telling you that, this, I think I might have shown you this fabric before, because I was showing you my collection of kind of some of the vintage stuff I've got. Now, some of you will recognise this as Laura Ashley. If I tell you that my mum used to wear this dress when I was a teenager, which is in the 70s, and show you close up, I think it's absolutely beautiful. Now, my mum wore that dress. It was like a pinafore dress with long sleeves. She wore it for years until it actually started to wear out in places. So she gave me permission to cut it up. She'd hung on to it because the fabric's so beautiful. She gave me permission to cut it up, and I've hesitated what to do with it. And I've decided I'm going to make her a lined version of that bag as a gift. And I'll share that with you so that you'll know how to do it. I'm also going to put a pocket in the side, which isn't in that version either. I'll show you how to put a pocket in the side. Now, I've got this very jolly print fabric for the lining. If you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I like to have, I don't like just plain linings. I like light coloured, jolly linings. Possibly what would be better with that would be, I don't know, something like a spotty or check, but this is what I've got and this is what I'm going to use. It's a piece of, it's from Lewis and Irene this Easter. I've told you about Lewis and Irene before. They're British designers that I really like, and this is from their Easter range. I'm not advertising for them, by the way. I'm just telling you that they're a designer I like. And this, I bought some Easter fabric and made an Easter table runner, and this is one of the leftovers. So I'm gonna be extravagant and use that for the lining for Mum's bag. So I hope you'll join this project with me, and I hope that it will give you inspiration. So I've cut out the pieces that I need for the bag. I've got a strip here which is 40 inches. This is for the outer. That's 40 inches by 13. So bear in mind that this is the top of the bag, or this is the top of the bag. I don't have a directional print, but make sure you've decided which is the top of your bag. Now, ignore the joins. I'm upcycling a dress, so a corduroy dress, so I've got joins. I've taken this off the skirt part, but if you just bought some canvas, you can use upholstery fabric for this. Canvas, any curtain weight, upholstery furnishing weight fabric will be suitable. If you're using a thinner fabric, then I suggest you back it with a fusible fleece such as Lesseline H640, which is what I'm going to be using, because although this is thick, I want my bag to stand up on its own, like I showed you with the tropical flowered bag, the unlined one. So I'm going to be backing this with fusible fleece. Then you need a lining piece the same size, and the same length, so it's 40 inches long, but because it's going to tuck under a turned over top of the outer, it's 12 inches deep. I'll put all of the measurements and the requirements in the description, but I'm just going through it now. Then you need a squarish piece, which is 10 inches by 11 inches, and that's for the base, and a corresponding lining piece, and obviously if you're going to be backing your outer fabric with a fusible fleece, you'll need a fusible piece of fusible fleece the same size for that. Then for the top zip of the bag, you need a 20-inch zip. Mine's a bit longer because I'm using it off a roll, so I have to put the puller on, the zip puller on, so I always cut it longer. So if you want to do zip tabs like me, make sure that you buy a zip that you can cut. So then for the zip tabs, and that is what gives you this closed in look here. But I'm going to do my zip tabs in the same fabric, and you need 4 pieces, 2 inches by 3 inches. Dropped one of them, I'll find it in a minute. For the zip ends, and then for the zip tabs, and then for the zips around the zip panel, you'll need two pieces which measure 20 inches by 2.5 inches. Now I've chosen to make the underneath of my zip panel, which would be lining, partly because I don't have enough of this flowery fabric, but also just because I think I prefer to do it like this. I'm actually going to have the same fabric underneath as my lining, so it's up to you. You could have the same as the outer, or you could have a contrast fabric. You need two pieces for the outer and 2 pieces for the lining. So in my case, I've got 4 of these 20-inch by 2.5-inch panel pieces here. Handles, I've found these, I've got these PVC faux leather ready-made straps. Now when my mum used to wear this dress all the time, she used to wear it with a pair of boots, which they weren't exactly this colour, but she loved wearing this dress with these boots. She was quite proud of her boots. So as an homage to that, I'm using these faux leather straps, which I think lift it a bit, just lift the old print a bit, and they also blend quite nicely with the pink in the lining. So I'm having that. But what you could do is you could have fabric in a contrast colour. You could use polyester strapping like I put on this one, or you could have a contrast fabric or the same fabric, and you just make them out of fabric. So you would cut a piece that is 24 inches by 5 inches, and then press it in half, press the ends in, fold it in half, and sew down there, and that would give you your 2 handles. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use these. Now I've said this one is going to have a side pocket. I've just about got enough of this lining to make the pocket lining with it. So the pocket is going to go in the side, and then that's a zip for that. So that zip measures 10 inches, and again you need to be able to trim it down. So make sure you've got a trimmable zip. Don't recommend a metal one. So the first thing for me to do is to fuse the fusible interface to the other side of this fabric and put the zip in first. Fused my fleece to the back of my fabric, and we're going to be sewing this 40-inch piece of fabric into a tube with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. So allowing for that 1/2 inch that's going to be off there, measure 9 3/4 inches from the fold here, from the fold and to there, and that will give you your halfway point of your finished bag. Then measure 2 inches down and put your piece of fabric for your zipped pocket on top of the fabric. This one measures 8 inches by about 16 inches. It's going to be doubled up like that to make the pocket inside. It could do with being a little bit wider, maybe 9 or 10 inches, but this is all I've got left, so mine's a little bit narrow. So the next step is this is going to be folded in. So I've put the fleece on the other side of my outer piece. You need to finish, this is the top of the bag, you need to finish your top edge, because although this is going to be lined, so you don't need to finish any other edges at this stage, you are going to finish off this top edge of the bag by folding it in. So you need that edge to be finished. Now I've overlocked it on the overlocker. If you don't have an overlocker, your choice is I can either turn in small hem and then turn in 3/4 of an inches down there, or you could use pinking shears, and or you could use the zigzag stitch on your sewing machine, whichever is suitable for you. But I've just overlocked the top at this stage. So the next stage is to, as I say, measure 9 3/4 inches in from the fold, and that will give you the halfway point of your finished bag. Then measure 2 inches down and place your piece of fabric in the middle, centre it in the middle, and then measure down another 1.5 inches. I'll put all these measurements in the description box, but measure down another 1.5 inches, and there put the midpoint of the length of your zips. Then measure 1/2 inch down and then draw across there. So you've drawn a sort of letterbox for your zip. So what you're going to do next is sew around that letterbox. Ignore the points at the moment, that's where you're going to be doing your cuts to. So once you've sewn that round, you're going to cut down here to open up your letterbox, going up to your points. At the moment, just sew around the rectangle. So make sure that you've pinned your piece of lining fabric in place so it doesn't move around, and also make sure that if it's got a right and a wrong side like mine has, that you've got right sides together. So I switch your stitch length down to about 2.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters, and then just stitch all the way around that rectangle. Make sure you pivot at the corners so that you get a neat crisp corner. So having sewn all around that rectangle, get a sharp pair of scissors, preferably with a sharp point, cut into there like that, and then cut down the middle of your rectangle until you've almost got to the end there, and then cut into the corners but don't go through the stitches. Cut into the corners but don't go through the stitches. Go back the other way. Do the same thing there. Take the pins out, and then you can poke your fabric through. So now you can turn your fabric to the inside of your pocket, and this is one of my reasons for using a nice fabric for the lining, is because I like to have a little bit of it showing. Now I've done this on other bags, it might not be what you like, but to me it's like getting piping without having to do any work. So what you would now do is take this over to the iron and press that out. So I'll just do that. Get your 9-inch zip and put it behind, making sure that you've not caught any of the lining fabric, and put it behind, and now just pin that in place. And you can choose to tack this, but I pin it, and make sure that you've caught all your layers. So here's the zip pinned, ready to be sewn. We're just going to top stitch a few millimeters away from the edge of the main fabric, all the way around, mirroring the shape of the rectangle. Make sure that you have kept the lining out of the way as you're sewing. The zip's been sewn all around there, and do check that it opens okay and doesn't catch before you proceed with the next step. So we're sewing around the zip line, the zipped pocket lining, making sure that we're not catching any of the layers of the outer bag in the process. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew the piece of fabric that's for your sides of your bag, match up the raw edges and sew down the seam. Having sewn our side pieces into a tube, the next step is to find the midpoint of the base. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you've got 10 by 11, so go by the shorter side and actually find the midpoint, mark it, and then find the side seam of your sides, and obviously that's your top, so make sure that's at the top, and then pin that in place. And then proceed around and sew it, pin it to the base. Use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and sew all the way around, attaching the sides to the base. Ease the fabric into the corners and make sure that you haven't got any fabric pleated down the sides. Do exactly the same with the lining pieces. Start by joining the long piece into a tube to form the sides, and then attach that to the base. Next, put the lining fabric, finished lining, inside the outer of the bag, wrong sides together. And as you see me doing here, turn over the top of the bag by 1 inch. That doesn't have to be absolutely exact. 3/4 to 1 inch, and tuck the lining fabric underneath as you see me doing here. So the next step is to sew along the finished edge of your outer fabric all the way around. To add your tabs to your zip, this is what you do. Now, I will link a video in the description where I'll show you this process start to finish, but I'll just run through it here. So you've got your 20-inch zip. If, like me, you've trimmed it to size, just make sure that you sew over the end or put pins in. I've sewn over the ends there. Make sure your zip pulls in the middle, and weight your zip down so to stop it shifting about, because you're measuring a distance from the end. So these two white lines here represent the end of your zip panel pieces, your 20-inch zip panel pieces. That's what they represent. So it's to give you a guide where you want your tabs to be in relation to the end of the panel. Get your 4 zip tab pieces, so they should each measure approximately 2 inches by 3 inches. It's not crucial because you're going to trim them anyway. Mark your 1/2 inch seam allowance on the right side of 2 of them and on the wrong side of 2 of them. So then here's your edge of your panel. That's your edge of your fabric there. So you need to position this so that the edge of your tab is 1.5 inches from the edge of your panel piece. Take no notice of the end of the zip. So that's 20 inches there. That's the end of your panel. So that's the end of your panel there. And then you're going 1.5 inches in, and that's the edge of your tab. And then another 1/2 inch in is where you're going to be sewing. And this principle applies whether you are adding a tab to anything of any size. You're going to have the end of whatever it is you're attaching, you're going to attach your zip to, and 1.5 inches in for your edge of your fabric, and then another 1/2 inch in is going to be where you're going to be sewing. So can you see that that's 2 inches from there? Okay, and you're going to be sewing down there, so we'll just put a pin in there. Now, without moving the zip, that's why you've got your weight, you go to your other end and do exactly the same thing. So put your piece of fabric 1.5 inches in from the end of what's representing the end of your fabric, your panel there, and you're going to be sewing here. So again, that's 2 inches apart, and put your other piece on. Make sure that your edges are together when you do that, the two sides of your zipper together when you do that, and then put another pin in. Go through all your layers. So there you go. So now you're ready to sew. So sew along the seam allowance line that you drew, and then fold the tabs towards the end of the zip and top stitch, and do the same the other end. Next, trim off the excess fabric and zip, leaving about 1/4 inch. This means that when you come to put your zip into your tab and need to fold it, you'll only be sewing through fabric. You won't be trying to sew through the fabric plus the end of a zip. Once you've done both ends, just trim off the sides of the tab so that the tab's the same width as the zip. Don't trim off the end yet. Having added the tabs to the zip, the next stage is to attach the zip to the zip panel. So turn it face down so the zip pull is face down, and pin the zip between the two pieces. Don't ever attempt to pin a zip with the zip pull in the way, and don't attempt to stitch it with the zip pull in the way. It'll never be neat if you do that. Always get it out the way. So I'm going to switch the foot on the sewing machine now to the zipper foot and sew down here. Switch to your zipper foot and then sew close to the teeth, and you do that by feeling where the teeth are through the fabric, and just sew all the way down the side of the zip. So having sewn one side, the next step is to get the other side of the zip and line it up with the other panel piece. Make sure that the edges line up. Clip that in place. Then get the other piece, put it on top. Pin that all the way down or clip it. So again, just going to sew down here. Make sure that you move the zip pull out of the way so that you can make sure that your line of stitches is straight. Don't ever try and sew with the zip pull in the way. So the zip's in. What's needed now is to press this down and top stitch. Finished off my edges with, I've just overlocked it, but you could use pinking shears or a zigzag stitch on your machine. The benefit of using zip tabs is that when you come to fold this now, you are actually only folding fabric. You're not trying to fold fabric plus the end of a zip. Now if you're using fabric insert handles at this point, you will have made them. I've not finished these, but you'll have made them. So folding inwards and then sewing down that side and that side. And at this point you would pin them 5 inches from the end into there like that. For detailed instructions how to do that, look at the unlined bag. But I'm going to be adding my handles to the outside like this. Next you need to pin the zip panel to the bag, and I'm sorry that this is not a very good shot. Basically open up the zip in the zip panel and slip it over the top of the bag like a collar almost, and have it so that the zip is facing the bottom of the bag and the raw edge of the panel is next to the top of the bag. It's clearer to see this in the next shot where I'm sewing it, but pin all around first. Once you've sewn all around, then get the zip panel and turn it towards the inside of the bag. And now you can top stitch it. And this will give you that sort of lip around the top of the bag. Now, at this point, I realised that this fabric that I'm using is, especially with the fusible fleece attached to it, is a little bit too thick for what I was attempting to do. So the top of my bag does look a bit untidy. And that is something to bear in mind when you're selecting fabrics. It might have been better if I'd cut my fleece a bit shorter than the actual outer fabric, but I didn't think of that until this point. So I did have a bit of a struggle to get this to be top stitched neatly, but as you can see, I can barely get it underneath the sewing machine, but the sewing machine foot. But I did eventually manage to sort of top stitch it after a fashion. enjoyed following me in this project. I'm just finishing sewing the handles onto this bag, and I'm really quite pleased with how it's turned out. It's actually looking so kind of big inside, and it's looking like such a useful bag. It's also got this side pocket, which I think is going to be great, and it's really quite heartening to see how beautiful the old Laura Ashley fabric looks. With, obviously she was a British fabric designer, how that fabric looks against one of the latest British designers, Lewis and Irene, and this fabric was from the Easter. It's quite poignant really.